I had a feeling that something was wrong with my wife, Caroline. Not much, but enough for someone who had known her for 12 years, of which he had been married to her for 10. Caroline and I have an ordinary Scandinavian family with 2 children, a 7-year-old boy and a 5-year-old girl. We live in our own house near the county capital, and we both work full-time. Caroline at City Hall, and I work for a small consulting company. My wife and I met at an evening class to learn advanced use of Microsoft Excel and married 2 years later. Of course, like most, our marriage has had its ups and downs, but never any major problems, at least in my opinion. The first signs came about a month after our 10-year anniversary. It was her slight decline in interest in sex. It wasn't that she was denying me sex, but she started offering quick caresses instead of making love, much more often than before. The next minor visible sign was an increase in her spending on clothes. Another sign was that she was picking on me more and more for no real reason. Caroline always spent at least 2 evenings a week with her friends on various innocent activities like aerobics, night classes, bowling, and badminton, but only a couple late nights a year with the girls at some bar or restaurant when one of the gang wanted to celebrate something. I did my best, but couldn't see any new or strange pattern in her nights out. My coworker, Eric, noticed that I was having problems with my marriage and told me it was better to find out the truth than to walk around feeling as bad as I did. I told him that a private investigator could probably find out the truth, but I couldn't hire a private investigator for 2 very simple reasons. First, there was no such person, at least not in the phone book, in our town or in the entire county. Second, even if there had been one, I didn't have the money to follow Caroline for any length of time. But I promised to do everything I could to put an end to the problems between Caroline and me. The final straw that broke the poor camel's back happened the first Saturday night after Eric suggested I do something. Caroline and I had been invited to a nice dinner hosted by friends just outside of town where she acted like a loving wife all evening. She even did so all the way home in the cab we shared with another couple. Of course, I had hopes of continuing the pleasant evening by making love to her. But as soon as the babysitter left our house, Caroline stopped acting so sweet and cut me short with words. "Forget it if you were foolish enough to expect anything from me tonight." I abandoned my attempts and replied with a bright smile. What could I expect from an icy, frigid bitch? Nothing more was said that evening, but it took me a few hours before I fell asleep. I used that time to come up with a simple plan. The only thing I needed to do was sign up for an online anonymity service so I could send emails without being tracked. After testing the email service on Sunday morning, I sent the following email to Caroline at her work on Monday. "Dear Mrs. Ekman, to my great disappointment, I have evidence of your infidelity which makes me feel sorry for your husband and envious of your lover for his pleasures with a gorgeous woman like you. Of course, I am sorely tempted to share my information with your husband. But I have a better offer because I want and need to have a good time with a gorgeous woman sponsored by you during my next business trip. So I expect you to be sitting alone at the Plaza Cafe today, Monday, at 2:30 p.m. to 3 p.m. with 600 euros in an envelope at the table. My buddy will greet you with the words, 'Aren't you Lars' sister?' You must answer, 'No, I am his wife.' You must then hand him the envelope. Thank you for your very kind cooperation. Your true friend." 600 euros was a very insignificant sum that couldn't be regarded as serious blackmail if she went to the police, and they were unlikely to see it as any kind of priority case to save her reputation as a cheating whore wife. On the other hand, it was insignificant enough for Caroline to be able to get it from an ATM with no problem. Both euros and our own kroner are available at ATMs outside of our bank's main office. That Monday, I suggested that Eric take a 3-hour coffee break at the Plaza Cafe. We got in there a few minutes before 3, and to my feigned surprise, I saw Caroline sitting alone at a table. And then to my real surprise, I saw Martin Jensen sitting alone a few tables away from her. That bastard Martin works at City Hall, too, and he's married to one of Caroline's best friends. We met him and his wife for dinner last Saturday night, but I didn't notice much between him and Caroline. As I stared at Caroline and Martin, I shouted loudly, "What the hell is going on here? Why are you two here instead of working? Why don't you two sit at the same table?" Martin ran off without saying a word to me, followed by Caroline silently leaving the cafe. Eric was even more confused than I was when I told him that we had probably managed to catch Caroline with her lover. I then called Martin's wife, Cecilia, and asked her if she had any idea why my wife and her husband had taken the afternoon off and were sitting at different tables in the cafe. I then told her that I suspected that Caroline was having an affair, and now Martin should be the prime suspect unless I got a very good explanation about what they were involved in. She promised to have a serious talk with Martin and call me when she knew something. This Martin was a very handsome man, usually expensively dressed, polite, with good manners and a real party animal. Of course, those of us who knew him from childhood had a very different opinion of him. At home, I logged into our bank account, which showed that 600 euros had been withdrawn and put back in during the day. I had enough of that information for the moment, so I filled in the divorce forms picked up at the courthouse during my lunch break. When Caroline got home, she was mad as a bee and lashed out at me. "You acted like an idiot in the cafeteria. I can explain it all if you'll bother to listen to me." I replied, "No, I don't want to listen because I don't care about your explanations. Just read these divorce papers and sign them. Everything is split 50-50 and you can't get a better deal, even with an attorney that will cost you a fortune." It was obvious that she was really pissed off, and she yelled at me, "These divorce papers are the only sensible thing you've been able to do in a long time?" Boiling with anger, she signed the divorce papers without reading them and shouted, "It will be a relief to me to get a real man instead of a lowlife like you. That's how my marriage ended." Caroline left the house, and I didn't care where. Later, I got a call from a sobbing Cecilia who told me that Martin had confessed to having an affair with Caroline. He was now crying and begging her to forgive him. She said she didn't know what to do and demanded that Martin move out and live with his parents for the next 2 weeks so she could have time to think about their future. I told her that Caroline and I had already signed the divorce papers. One thing was for sure, if Caroline thought Martin was her new dream man, she could forget about it, but it wasn't my place to tell her that. After the phone call, I moved all of Caroline's clothes into the guest room. This infuriated her when she got home. I couldn't resist the temptation to tell her that I had told Cecilia about what I had seen at the Plaza Cafe. That information didn't make her any happier. The next day, strange things happened. Coming home after work, Caroline surprised me by saying, "Dear Lars, I am sorry and regret everything I said yesterday in my angry mood. I was stressed and said stupid things I didn't mean. Can you forgive me for that? You are and always will be my true love. No more hard feelings. We are adults, and we are expected to do our best to solve our problems. Please tear up those stupid divorce papers we signed yesterday in an angry mood, and I promise to be a much better loving wife, and I will explain everything about yesterday." I looked her straight in the eye when I told her, "The divorce papers are in court, and I already know all about Martin and your affair. Last night after you left, Martin confessed to cheating on Cecilia, who called and told me that your real man was a crying weakling begging for mercy and claimed you were a fraudulent whore who seduced him. He's not much of a match for the real man instead of me, is he?" Caroline sobbed and asked, panting, "Did Cecilia tell you about Martin and me?" "Yes, and that explains why our marriage has been a loveless marriage for the last while. I suspected your deception, but found no real proof until Martin confessed to Cecilia." Caroline got a strange look on her face when she said, "But how come you made me sign the divorce papers hours before Cecilia told you about Martin's confession?" I had had enough last Saturday night, and within a few sleepless hours I had decided that divorce was my only possible solution. The decision to divorce was made many hours before that crying prick Martin confessed to cheating on you. I'm sorry, and I'd like to undo everything I've done to Martin. Can you give me a second chance and forgive me?" "No, because I'll never understand how you can prefer that bastard Martin to me and dream of him as a real man. I'll never forget how you've humiliated me ever since you fell in love with him. But that pile of shit will be yours when Cecilia's done with him. You probably didn't know that all of their inherited stocks, savings, expensive house, and cars are Cecilia's private property. The only thing Martin owns is a heck of a lot of debt since he bankrupted his business. Now Martin is going to lose his expensive Rolex and BMW if those toys were impressing you. If you really love this whiny creep, you'll have to support him and his expensive habits." she replied. I made a terrible mistake, and I will never understand how I could have been so stupid to be seduced and deceived by this slippery worm. I would rather be alone for the rest of my life than have anything to do with him. Town hall gossipers reported that Martin sent Caroline to hell when she told him about the divorce papers she signed and suggested that they were an official couple. This explains why she begged me the day after signing the divorce papers to forgive her and call off the divorce. Martin had successfully avoided me ever since he saw me in the coffee shop. The very second day after his confession, his doctor put him on sick leave due to stress and physical problems. As I expected, Cecilia filed for divorce after a 2-week hiatus, and Martin never returned to his job at City Hall. After being on sick leave for several months, he left town for a new job. He and Caroline never met or even spoke again. Caroline rented an apartment in a nice neighborhood, but she had to wait 3 months before she could move in. We agreed that until then she would stay in our spare room and that neither of us would start dating before our divorce was final. Although the atmosphere in the house was cold, the agreement worked out better than expected. Then, about 2 months after we filed for divorce, something very unexpected happened to Caroline. Saturday night, she asked me if I could promise to keep an important secret about her economic affairs. I promised, and she said, "You may have heard that someone in our town won the jackpot in the lottery. I'm the winner. The jackpot is $3 million. That's enough to solve all my problems. We're still married, which is why I have to ask you if you claim half of it." Congratulations. No, I demand nothing and expect nothing from you. My only suggestion is that you set up funds for the kids so they can study, buy cars and apartments when they grow up, and then support them when they get married. She looked at me and said, "Are you sure you won't try to demand anything from me?" "Yes, when we lived together, all I needed was your love. But I'm sure that when Martin gets this information, you'll have him instantly, begging him to forgive him and be with you together. He will never know because you are the only one who got this information from me and you promised to remain silent. Even though I haven't kept my own promises to you, I am convinced that you are a better man than I am and are keeping what you promised." Nothing more was said on the subject, and everything went on as usual, except that Caroline was out of town the following Thursday and Friday. On Saturday, she asked me if we could have dinner together because she needed to tell me something. I agreed. Our kids were staying the night at one of their friends' houses. The dinner was great, with my favorite food and great wine, so I started to expect some sort of attempt to buy my love, and I was curious as to what she thought the value of my love was and how much she was willing to pay for it. During a delicious dessert, she said, "I did exactly as you suggested and created funds for our children." I replied, "You are a good mother, and these funds will be of great benefit to them when they grow up." Nothing more was said on the subject, and we continued our pleasant small talk about other daily affairs. During coffee and brandy after the meal, when we were comfortably seated on the sofa in the drawing room, she said, "I am sorry that I was a stupid cheap whore who ruined our happy family by deceiving and humiliating the best man I have ever known. Today I can't understand how and why I could have succumbed to Martin's advances and seduction. I regret the hell out of it, and have spent many sleepless nights crying about how damn stupid I was. Of course, I know for a fact that money can't buy your love and forgiveness. But we do know that courts usually sentence the offender to pay money to his victim as compensation for the pain and humiliation caused. But since no court in this country cared what I did to you, I handled the case myself. I acted as both the prosecutor and the judge who ruled that all lottery money left over from our children's fundraiser goes into your personal account. What I did cannot be undone. She gave me the receipts from the bank, and I was silent for a long time before I said, "Good God, what have you done? I can't take your money. I'll give it back to you." She replied, "You don't owe me anything back. The lawyers who organized this said it's impossible because there are no conditions. The money is yours and yours alone, and I cannot and do not want to regret what I have done with it. I don't demand or expect anything in return. I did what I would have done before I got caught in this stupid scam. What the hell could I have done? My love wasn't for sale, but Caroline wasn't trying to buy it. No conditions at all, no requests for forgiveness. She'd only talked about compensation. She didn't even try to kiss me. Although I was in some shock, I began to realize that her love for me was real. Caroline was an intelligent, beautiful woman and the mother of my children. I suspected, without a doubt, that she was still in love with me. Would I ever be able to find a better woman than her? Probably not. Find a single woman equal to her? Not even that. Would I be able to forgive her? I didn't know, but why not give it a serious try? I decided to do it. I said, "Dear Caroline, we are still married and we should talk to each other. Talk about the past and talk about the future. I think talking about the future is better suited after this delicious dinner. Don't you?" She replied, "Yes." I continued, "Divorce hurts like hell, and it hurts even more now after I realized how much you really love me and how much you regret your affair." She cried and sobbed. "I pray every night that one day you will forgive me and give me a second chance." I moved closer to Caroline, put my arms around her and said, "We are still married. Should we seriously try to stay that way?" She looked me straight in the eyes and whispered, "Am I dreaming or is it true?" "It's true because I hope you're still the same my Caroline you were before she was tainted by Martin. I miss that Caroline like hell." She hugged me tightly and whispered, "You'll never regret this." That evening could only end one way, with gloriously intense lovemaking. During that night, I did everything I could to give her the best sex she had ever had, and she did the same with me. It was like a wedding night again, and for a long time after that night, we acted like newlyweds. Epilogue. We skipped the divorce. Everything was fine in our relationship, and now we are a happy family again. Our children demanded that Caroline and I promise that we would never try to divorce again. We hardly ever talked about Caroline's affair with Martin. For some reason, I didn't really care about any of the details. Even though she gave me all her money, I never felt like she bought me back because she had no conditions, just a faint hope. She put everything she had at stake, won what she wanted, and only the future would show her if she did the right thing. The truth is, I missed her so much that I probably would have done something myself to get her back without any money. One thing is for sure, I love Caroline, and she loves me.